Gentlemen, welcome to the Be Man Podcast. I'm your host, Greg Denning. Thanks for being here, man. Really appreciate you, brother. Appreciate you listening. Appreciate you being here. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast, please remember to do that. And if you like what you hear, man, leave a review up to 5 stars and share this with friends and family, colleagues. Get this stuff out there. We've got to all participate in this movement to help men rise to be the very best version of themselves as husbands and fathers and businessmen and leaders and men. Today, my guest is Ryan King, and online he writes at The Wisdom of Kings, which is motivational, nuanced content on wisdom, manhood, relationships, and leadership. And he's a husband and a father to two young men, and a difference maker, right? And he's the CEO of Guardian Payments. We dive into how he built that. It was really one transaction at a time, which is a pretty awesome story. He just kept plugging away until he got it done. But it also dives in and connects to lessons he learned as a baseball pitcher in college, and how you just throw the next pitch, and how you build one thing at a time, really leaning in to whatever it is that needs to be improved, right? He tells his awesome story. He got married at 24 and his wife was pregnant. He's like, look, I had to become a man fast and figure things out and learn by trial and error. And then now he's sharing a lot of the things and same thing, I'm on the same journey. We're sharing the lessons we learned along the way, the kind of the hard, slow trial and error way, hoping to shed some light and inspiration and insight, some wisdom, so that others don't have to make the same mistakes. So we can literally collapse time by learning what took us months to learn. We can share in moments, and we can learn that from others, and then we can turn around and share it. And he even talks about that, right? The three men that every man needs, right? And I'm not going to spoil that. You get into that, but there's some great stuff here. There's really awesome strategies for business and life. So let's dive in. Enjoy. Ryan, man, we are super excited to have you on the show, brother, and appreciate it. You share some incredible content that I want to talk about, and you've done some really cool things with family and business and fitness. So I want to hit it all, but give us a little bit of background. How did it start, and how did you get where you are? And give us a little bit of your story.
Oh man, well for me, it's getting exposed to a lot of this stuff on Instagram has been kind of eye-opening because um, when I got started, when I got married at 24, and my wife, I was actually pregnant at the time with my first son, and it was kind of
So you guys started right out
I
the
had to
gates.
go from 0 to 60, man. Like I
Yes.
had to turn into a man real quick, you
Yes,
know.
you did.
But I didn't actually turn into a man real quick, but I had to start trying to
Yep.
urgently. Um, and so yeah, for me, so much of the stuff that I read about now, back at the time, man, in 2007, podcasts were mainly sports, like there wasn't a whole lot of self-improvement podcasts or
Right.
masculine podcasts. YouTube was, instructional videos and,
Yep.
cat videos, and Instagram was people taking pictures of their food. And, so I, I just had to trial and error, just as I encountered something, whether it was business or marriage or being a dad or whatever. It was just like, man, I don't really have outside sources that I know of that I can say, hey, what do I do about this? What do I do about that? So I just had to be real reflective and analytical, and try things and see what worked. And so yeah, I'm just the product of a whole lot of experimentation, man.
Yeah, man. And I can relate to that. You're right. As you start thinking kind of pre what the internet is now, when you get before that, it's like, man, where do you find access to truth, to like principles
Yeah,
and practices, habits, instruction? I mean, I can see you've got your huge library. I've got my library. Like I turn to books
yeah,
because that's where I could find things there. But
yeah,
it was interesting how much of a dearth of just an absence of rock solid men and mentors that I had growing up. And I'm with you, man. I'm like, and I remember the frustration you probably did too, of like months or years of like, come on, like, how do we figure this out? Right?
absolutely.
Let's go. And then finally experimentation or trial and error, or reading something, or finally you meet somebody like, there it is.
Yeah.
That's it. And it's a game changer.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, yeah, we did have books. There were absolutely books, but you know, there wasn't really like a rating system on it. So you just went to the bookstore and you really didn't know
Mm,
if the book was any good or not. So you just had to read it, and maybe two chapters were actually applicable.
yeah.
And the rest of it was just like, well, that was a waste of time.
Yep.
So it was just there was I feel like what the resources that men have available now, and the resources that men like you and I are creating, um, it really helps filter through a lot of the stuff that doesn't work, and helps speed that process up that men like you and I had to learn the hard way, over the course of years.
Yep.
We can, if a younger dude is actually wise enough to, and humble enough to be like, you know what, I'm going to listen to these guys that have been there. we
Yes.
can we can really help you skip over a lot of the stages that cause a lot of pain and a lot of frustration. But you have to be willing to be humble and be like, you know what, even if it doesn't make sense to me, I'm going to trust that these guys have been there.
Right. Because they're saying something that sounds important, even though if I haven't experienced it yet, man, this stuff matters. That's
Absolutely.
it's and what you're saying right there is so important because that's how we can collapse time, so to speak.
Yes.
We can take decades and
You
quite
can
literally
easily.
turn them into days.
Yeah.
Like the
Oh,
things that you and I have
absolutely.
learned over decades say, hey, look, fellas, pay attention to this. It matters so much. And you
Yep.
collapse time.
And that's what dads are supposed to be doing anyway. But a
Yes.
lot of dads weren't taught it, so they don't have it to teach,
Yeah.
or they aren't there at all, or they're passive, or they're tired because they're working a lot, or whatever. And there's a lot of reasons why dads didn't pass that stuff on. But a lot of dads, I mean, talk about how bad we had it. Think about how bad our dads had it. Talk about not
Mhm.
having any access to anything different. Like all those dads had to go off of was how their dads and uncles acted. They had nothing.
Yeah. Very,
Yeah,
very local community with very limited, even any
yeah,
kind of media that was coming in through radio or TV was really entertainment based. So you're
yeah. I
right.
mean, they had like mail ordered audio tapes from
Right.
Tony Robbins and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it's easy to point the finger at our dads and be like, "Oh, they didn't teach us this stuff." Well, I mean, they can't teach us stuff they didn't know, and they usually
Right.
only had access to three or four human beings that happened to be in the small town they lived in. So
Yeah.
it's
But that's
just
a
I think,
huge, huge reminder for you and me still with the massive amounts of information and stuff that's available and all the massive amount of entertainment that's available. I want to just kind of dial in on what you said there. You can't teach what you don't know.
yeah,
And so one of I think of our responsibilities or moral obligations as men is to acquire knowledge
yeah,
and know it like deeply for ourselves so that we have something to offer. So especially for our kids, we can answer questions.
yeah. Well, and I think one of the things, and this is probably going to be the topic of my next post, is one thing I've noticed is that there's an abundance of young men seeking mentors. I think all young, ambitious men are looking for mentors to help
Yeah.
them fast forward, right? But one of the things that as men we're not doing a very good job of is, once we've made it, we're not becoming mentors to
Yep.
others. We want mentors to help us. We want to take, but once our lives get to where they need to be, we don't see the duty that we have to pass along that knowledge to more than just our sons. There's so
Yep.
many men out there that didn't have father figures and still don't have father figures.
Yep.
And so, yeah, it's great. And I think young men need to have the humility to seek out mentors, but I think a lot of men are doing a really bad job of like, oh, I've made it, so I'm going to sit back and enjoy, the life that I've built, instead of
Wow.
taking that and being like, you know what, now it's my turn to find people I can mentor and pass on the knowledge that I've learned. And there's an abundance of young men seeking mentors. There is not an abundance of older, experienced men saying, "Here I am.
Yeah.
I'll mentor you."
Yep.
They'd rather sit back and enjoy the spoils. So
Right.
they can take from mentors, which, as somebody who's, I guess, viewed as a mentor, um, you take and take and take from mentors, and that's fine. I'm perfectly happy to give. But what I expect in return is that when I die, or when I'm older, you're passing on what I've taught you to somebody else.
Somebody
Otherwise,
picks up
all
the
this
torch.
knowledge that I've acquired in order to help myself and to help you, is going to die with you.
Yeah. And so it
And
keeps
you have a
passing on.
responsibility to take. I don't mind if you take from me. That's what I want. But I expect you to give that to somebody else too, and
Yes.
not just use it for your own personal life.
Yep.
I want you to have a great life personally, but it doesn't end there.
You've got to give. And it begs the question then, are we as anxious or desirous to turn around and help and lead and teach and mentor as we are to seek help and succeed?
I don't think so, because it's easy to want help and succeed because
Yeah,
that's
because
selfish.
you're driven. Like there's benefits there, man.
Yeah, but so many men. It's and what really irks me is when I see those men that have made it talking down to these young guys that haven't made it, like, "Oh, you're soft," or "You're whatever." It's like, then help them be not soft, man.
Yep.
Like,
Yep.
they probably don't want to be soft. They just haven't been taught how.
Right. Exactly. They don't know. And
You
it's
know?
easy. It's easy. You'll probably relate to this too. Is once you get to a certain level, sometimes it can actually be hard to really remember what it was like
Yes.
in your previous self.
Oh,
Like my wife and I'll
absolutely.
be rolling along. We're like, and we'll have to stop. So it's like, oh yeah, like we used to have totally fixed mindsets. Like,
Mhm.
no, we can't do this. That's just the way we are. We used to live in that world, and
Yeah.
now we're like, nah, we can figure out anything,
Yeah.
right? But you have to
Well, and
remember we used to be
what's
there.
really been funny is, for me, I've only been in any kind of public space, for about 6 months. Like, I've never been on a podcast until 6 months ago. I started my Instagram page in January, so this is all very new for me. But one of the things that I'm really shocked by is just how many people there are that just really basic stuff is like mind blowing for
Yep.
them. Like,
It's so true.
you don't have to have it all figured out to be really helpful for people,
Yep.
you know. Uh,
I
and yeah,
forget that too all the time. I get into the complexity of it all, and you kind of like, oh yeah, basics, like let's hit some next level stuff, and I forget, like no, the basics, common sense isn't common practice or common knowledge, and like we got to share the
no,
fundamentals that still make a huge
absolutely.
difference.
And as much as what's really what's really funny and rewarding and has given me a lot of value for myself is just how much better a man I've become since I started talking about this.
Yeah.
Like, it's forced me to take things that I did kind of accidentally occasionally, and the process of thinking through it and teaching it to somebody else has made me, conceptualize it in a way that I can apply on my own. And
Yep.
I'm actually a better man now for having mentored other
Yep.
people.
Exactly.
My wife will tell you, like, my whole persona is not my whole persona, but the consistency of the kind of persona that I want to have
Yes. Consistency.
is 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 far more reliable. I'm not just accidentally being the right kind of husband or the right kind of
Yep.
dad every once in a while. I've identified traits that I used to just kind of be aware of, but it wasn't really drilled down to its
Yep.
essence in a way that I even could apply universally, right? And
Exactly.
so there's a lot of value, I think, for men in becoming mentors, because teaching it
Because
to other
you
people
learn when
clarifies
you
it for
teach.
you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so I think,
I had that experience so many times where I'm literally like, while I'm teaching something, I'm learning so much because you're trying to conceptualize it. Like, how can I give this a metaphor, a comparison, or how can I
Mhm.
give this framework? And you're like, oh, there it is.
Yeah,
And it makes you
absolutely.
sharper because of it.
Yeah, so I think I think if we could just snap our fingers and create an ideal scenario, I think, every man needs three roles in his life. He needs a mentor. No matter where you're at in life, you still need a mentor.
Yep.
You need somebody you're accountable to besides just yourself.
Yep.
You need brothers who are at the same phase of life that you're in, that are dealing with the same struggles, and you guys can, help, link arms and hold each other up. And then you need people below you that you're mentoring. And I kind of view it as like this escalator where eventually at some point you don't have a mentor because everybody that older than you is dead, right? And then you're officially the patriarch. I know that word's not sexy anymore, but and then that person falls off the end of the escalator, and you always need somebody ahead of you, somebody on the step with you,
Yes.
and somebody behind you as you
Yes.
elevate in life. And if we had that in some sort of systematized way of society as men, man, that'd be powerful.
Huge.
Yeah.
That's massive.
Yeah.
And man, that's so cool. It's around those exact same things. Well, I created what's called a master Be the Man Masterclass and Tribe, right? And it was driven by those exact same things you're talking about. That we need
Really?
mentors and coaches. We need a community, a brotherhood, a band of brothers to be together, and we need people we can help and lead and teach and share things with and learn from.
Yeah.
Right. So it's that same model. You're spot on, brother. So what's driving you, man? What's driving you to kind of take what you've been learning over all these years and just start sharing it?
Um, man, I think anybody that's been sitting back and observing society and just across the board, we could get into all kinds of weeds about that. But anybody that's just been sitting back and observing society for the last, not just the last 2 years, it's gotten really bad the last 2 years, but over the course of the last 5 years, I found myself thinking like, is nobody going to step up and lead
Yeah.
and talk sense? And I kept waiting for somebody to do it. And I finally just was like, well, I don't really feel qualified, but if nobody else is going to do it, I'll try,
That's
and
awesome.
I didn't know what to expect. I mean, I really figured, nobody'd really care about anything I had to say. I'm not a famous rock star or anything, like, um, so the response has been shocking, that, my page has grown the way that it has. And, I've been really fortunate and humbled to get invited onto podcasts like this and all that, because for me, and I think that's what holds a lot of men back from doing that mentoring is, any man that has that leadership qualities that's, humble enough to be aware of his own faults.
Hmm.
You kind of feel this, it's weird to step up and say, hey, follow me. I know what I'm talking about, because it's like, man, there's a lot of stuff that I'm still figuring out,
Right.
and that's a weird place to be in, because I'm all too aware of myself and my failures and the things that I've screwed up.
Yep.
So it's kind of strange to step up and say, hey, y'all should listen to me. It feels very weird, but what I've learned is that, you don't have to know everything. I just have to know enough to help the people that don't know what I know. And,
Right.
the stuff that I don't know, I need to find somebody to teach me that, and I think it
Exactly.
would be really helpful for a lot of men to just be like, to hear that, like, man, it's okay if you don't know everything.
Yeah. Man,
What
that's
you do know would be really helpful for a lot of people.
right. And that's like it's so cool that the way you articulate that. And I remember feeling that. So I ended up out on my own at 16, just like desperate to find
Yeah.
answers, right? I'm like, come on, give me something. And
Mhm.
I would have an experience or come across the book or a principle in a book. And I was like, man, okay, that's at first it was just interesting to me. I'm like, that's interesting. That's something I haven't thought about before. And so I would
Mhm.
try it. And as soon as it worked, I literally felt like running down the street telling people, like, you
Yeah,
guys,
I
like
know.
I just tried this. It totally worked. It was amazing. And
Yeah.
especially where, I was in really poor neighborhoods and tough circumstances back then. And I would meet people and we hear them, interact and see their conversation, especially where you'd see people suffering or struggling. And
Mhm.
I'd be like, look, man, I just read this thing and I tried it. This principle, this habit, this mindset, it just works.
Yeah.
And that's really where it started for me. I was 18, 19 already, like just longing to share the few things that I found that were working, right? Even
Yeah.
though I was like, man, I'm still working on all this. But I'm
Yeah.
like, this is working for me here. And I
Yeah.
started sharing that with that along that same line of like, I don't have it all figured out, but this is working for me. And you maybe you want to try it.
Well, and I think what's really interesting in hearing you say that, is there's some characteristics there at the root of that that aren't that nobody talks about in terms of like being a man, but they're really important, like, so for me, what jumped out to me is that you're curious.
Yeah.
And curiosity, like, what are other people doing that's working better, and imagination, having that imagination to picture what your life could be like,
Yes.
and trying to figure out how to get to that. Those are things, when you say the words curiosity and imagination, you think of like a 5-year-old, right? Like, that's not something that grown men are like, you know what helped me be successful is curiosity.
Yeah.
But at the root of what you're talking about is a very masculine expression and a very mature, grown up expression of a very childlike quality of
Exactly.
curiosity and imagination, and I think a lot of men would benefit greatly from realizing how that those things can be childish,
Yep.
but there's also a very masculine, grounded expression of those characteristics that would really benefit a lot of men if they cultivated some curiosity and imagination.
Oh, true. Both of those characteristics can be very manly and very
Absolutely.
powerful.
How are you
That's
supposed to, men create things? How are you supposed to
yes,
create things if you can't imagine them first,
yes. If
right?
you can't, that's one of the things I teach is like how like so many men, as far out as they can see is this weekend. Like, how could I get through the week? They can, the extent of their vision is okay. Friday, gosh, I'm done with the work week. I can just entertain myself to death all weekend, and I don't want to think about Monday. So that's about the extent of the vision or the imagination. And you're spot on there with like because we have to see again. Like it was Zig Ziglar, I think he said, you can't hit a target you don't have, or you can't hit a target you can't see, right?
Mhm.
And if we don't have the target, if we don't have the imagination, if we can't at least try to see what
Absolutely.
it could be like you're just shooting blindly. You're throwing darts in the dark, and you're hoping, right? And hope is never a strategy. It just doesn't
Yeah.
work. You got to like
Well, and
see something and start building.
I think it's important to try to get to the root of it and explain it in a different way because what we call that as men is vision. Have vision.
Yeah. Yeah.
But for a 19-year-old kid, it's like, what does that mean? It's
Yep.
like, okay, here's how to have vision, man. Like you're like a zoo animal that's forgotten how to hunt. And
Yep.
like, remember being 5 years old and you just imagine stuff and you're like, man, I can't wait to be an adult and I'm going to do all these things I imagine. And you get, life beats you down and you get to this point where you are just surviving for the weekend. And so how do you teach a man to have vision? Well, go back to childhood and you at one point you had an imagination
Yep.
and cultivate that until it becomes something that's a vision.
Yep.
That's really what vision is a very masculine and ambitious word for a childlike imagination. It's just
Imagination.
it's imagination that's matured.
Yep. What
You
was
know,
interesting for me as we're talking through this and the way you're articulating this so well, I think it was the desperation of my circumstance that it almost forced me to to imagine something better.
yeah,
Right? Like now I teach it like where there's pain, there's power. And it's in that pain, you're like, this sucks so bad.
yeah,
You have to imagine something better. And then the mental process there, the main was like, okay, how could this be different? How could the marriage be different? How could my health be different? How could my work situation be different? And imagine it. And then you can just be like, wait a minute, if that's what's possible, and this is where I am, what are the steps to get me from where I am to where I want to be?
yeah,
And then you start mapping out this plan that to recreate your life.
yeah, yeah. And what's really interesting to me, is that you say that it was desperation. But there's a lot of desperate people that don't take those steps that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I don't know what that answer is. What is it that distinguishes somebody? One person is desperate and they start looking for how to make it better. Like you believe that you could have something better, whereas a lot of people don't have that hope. They don't have that belief.
Right.
They're desperate, but they don't think that it's possible for them to do anything about it. They
Right.
feel, disenfranchised. They feel uh, discontent, like
Right.
those good things aren't for them, and that's really sad. But I haven't been. That's something I wish I knew the answer to, so I could write about it. But I haven't been able to figure out. Like you put 100 people into a desperate situation, and
Not all 100 are going to come out of it. Yeah.
five of them are going to react like you.
Yep.
The other 95 are just going to think, "Oh, man, this sucks." And I don't know what separates those people. If I knew the answer, I think there'd be a lot of help to be had there. But it's worth pondering.
Man, that one's worth thinking about
Yeah,
for a lot of years.
yeah,
That one's, you're right. There's something there. But what's interesting, I don't look at myself as like special or different, or like that there was something about me that I think anyone can do what I did.
Yeah.
But it's worth some thought there. There was something that switched. You're right, because some of the people I was around, they stayed there. They never came out, man.
Well, and to you, it's not special or different. That's why it's a gift. Because people, there's a lot of things. I think that's one of the things that I really try to do, and one of the things I try to emphasize is, we have a lot of power. Our words have a lot of power because there's a lot of things people have told me about myself that I say the same thing. Like, "Well, I didn't think I was different or special," but what seems like just what we take for granted about
Right.
ourselves, other people see what the value really is in that. And
Right.
so a lot of times people don't know what our gifts are until we don't. It's hard for us to see what our gifts are until someone else speaks
Is
to it.
is looking over like, dude, Ryan, just what's your superpower, bro? Like,
Yeah, and for
how
me,
are
it's
you
like, bro,
doing
I
this?
just I just wake up and do what makes the most sense. But like,
Yeah.
and at the same time, you're seeing me in my sweet spot. You're seeing me in my gift. And so what we have a bad habit of doing is we fill in the blanks with perfection too. And it's like, bro, like you might think that I have all this stuff figured out or whatever. You're seeing me in the areas that I'm gifted at. Like if you took me to Home Depot, you wouldn't think that about me anymore
Yeah.
because I'm lost, like, and
Yep.
so it's easy to fill in the blanks of somebody that's, when we see them operating in their gift and assume that they're gifted
Yes.
in every area of their
Right.
life,
Right.
as opposed, and we have that tendency to fill it, oh, I see this person doing these three things really well. He must have everything figured out. It's
Yep.
like, no, you're seeing a very small picture of who I am. Like there's plenty of other things that you're gifted at that I'm clueless about.
Right.
You, and I think I think it's important to talk about those things too, so that people don't compare themselves to something unrealistic.
Exactly. And where we each of us operates in our strengths
Yes,
and don't
absolutely.
compare other strengths to our weaknesses. Because you're right. In fact, I would say there's more areas of weakness than there are strengths. There's more arenas where you and I step in and are just awkward, total noobs,
Oh yeah,
whether it's
yeah,
the dance floor or on stage singing
absolutely.
or like some athletic thing or whatever work. You step in anywhere and you're like, I got nothing. You set me in
Yeah,
front of a computer and ask me to program something. I'm like, sorry,
me too.
fellas. Like,
See, I'm that way. I'm that way mechanically. Like if you put me in front of like an engine or ask me to build something, it's like I can follow steps on a YouTube video, but it makes no sense to me. Whereas
right.
I meet other people that, man, they're not very good at communicating and they seem really closed off or whatever. Dude, they can take anything apart and just put it back together, and nobody taught them. They just get it.
They figure it
And you
out.
see
Yep.
this with like musicians, man. Like you hand somebody a guitar, and it's like they're just magically, not magically, they have to work, but they just get it right.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's something I don't think is talked about enough in a lot of these, in a lot of these spaces where we're talking about self improvement or
Yep.
whatever. Is like, you know, everybody has things that just come easily,
Yeah.
and then they have things that, man, that's just, I'm like a caveman trying to understand calculus on that, bro. Like
Right.
I'm helpless when it comes to a lot of different things in my life. And I think,
Same. And it's interesting, not only like you're saying, not only is it not talked about enough, it's also not valued enough where there are certain things that we value above other things, kind of, especially some of the obvious things that are kind of measured and out in society, like, hey, this is, it's kind of, it's seen, it's real obvious. And so people are like, oh, let's really value that, where, man, none of society would work if some of the behind the scenes stuff wasn't happening. And that's where those guys are back there. They're, making magic happen. Obviously, they're great at it. They're geniuses. They're
yeah.
building incredible things that make our life so much better, but it's all behind the scenes. And so it's
And I
not
think,
valued as much.
that's something that, the men that have experience, the men that are more grounded, that are out, you know, talking about these things and trying to help men. It's important for us to speak out against that narrative of these cliches of like, oh, you got to be an alpha male or whatever.
Right.
It's like, bro, you can be as alpha as you want. If you go step on the football field with Tom Brady, that dude's the alpha, and
Yep.
everybody on that team is an alpha. They're all rich, they're all athletic, they're all high testosterone guys, but when it comes to real life, and you're really trying to accomplish something, you need role players. And Tom Brady needs an offensive line. And yeah, he might get the glory, but he couldn't do it without that left tackle either. And as men, we're not doing a very good job of trying to invite men in that say, you know what, bro, you don't have to be an alpha. You don't have to know how to, kickbox or whatever. Like, you bring your gift.
Yeah.
And your gift is valued, even if it's just a punt return.
Man,
We
well,
all get a Super Bowl ring, right?
even in
all
that comparison, like, think how many off the field
absolutely
people are required for the NFL even to exist.
Yeah, and I think I think a lot of men don't feel comfortable coming to the table with things like what we're doing, because their gift really is just, maybe they're the trainer or the punter, and they're like, oh man, all these guys are quarterbacks and I'm just not a quarterback, and and it makes them feel like they don't belong. And I have a problem with that. Like, in reality, it's not good to have a team of alphas. That's the diva wide receiver that's complaining to Tom Brady that he's not getting enough catches. So that doesn't help the team win. What helps the team win is everybody being humble and everybody just playing the role that they have to play. And if that means that you're the one that has to step up and be the quarterback, then you need to have the confidence and the ability and the capability to do that. But if somebody else is a better quarterback, then you need to have the humility to say, what job can I do to contribute to the team?
Yes.
And I don't think we're doing a very good job as men of letting other men know that might be introverted, right? Or that might not have these hyper masculine traits, but they're really gifted in a lot of other ways, and they have a lot of value that they can contribute
So much to offer.
to
Yes.
manhood in general, right? Like, whether it's a group of men or a brotherhood like what you've got or whatever. I really think as men we need to be more, and I don't know, more inviting to just say, bro, you don't have to be Tom Brady, man. You're welcome to be here. We're proud to call you brother.
Yeah. Come
You know,
as you are.
come as you
And
are, and be
Chase.
willing to learn and be
Yeah.
humble and willing to fill the role that needs to be filled. And sometimes that might mean you have to lead, even if you don't feel qualified.
Right.
Because you might be the best qualified of the group. You might not be the most qualified in the world, but you're the best qualified we've got. So even if you don't feel up to it, do it anyway. And so it's both, and I think we've lost a lot of that in this whole everybody be an alpha male conversation.
Agreed. Agreed.
That, if you need to be an alpha, then you need to be able to be. But there's still a place for men that don't have, there's a lot of men that have no desire to be in the spotlight.
Right.
They just want to show up, do their job, and be part of something meaningful, enjoy the camaraderie, enjoy the brotherhood, and just be a good lieutenant.
I think that's most men.
Yeah, probably. But we're not telling men like, hey, that's okay, dude.
Yep.
You know what?
Absolutely.
There's nothing to be ashamed of about that. You're not wrong because you don't. There's not something wrong with you because you don't want to be the quarterback.
Yep.
We want you here. And we want you to be part of these conversations. We want you to feel welcome in this brotherhood. And I don't see anybody promoting that. There's this very narrow, restrictive definition of being a man. It's like, if you're not an alpha, then you're a beta. And man, that's such nonsense.
Yep.
It is such nonsense, and it doesn't reflect the real world at all.
Right. So, okay, well, that's actually a good, there's a couple things I want to think, kind of shift to, but if you're right, there is a misconception, like, if I'm going to be a man, it's this. And I think, from my perspective, there are some common denominators that I think all of us should work on, but it doesn't have to be this role. So that's a good question. Or like, lean in, like, what is real manliness? What are those elements that you, in your experience and some of your thoughts, like, what is real manliness? What is it that we should be working on?
I think it's virtue, man. I mean, I really think,
Aristotle, bro, right there.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's things like, and I just wrote a post, and it's, we're looking at, for me, I kind of have to go back to everything that predates the Industrial Revolution to really find what masculinity's always been, because I feel like ever since the Industrial Revolution, everything's so tainted by Hollywood and radio, and I'm not just talking about like the last 15 years. You know, like in the 80s, it was like, oh, men are like Rambo. It's like, no, not every dude's Rambo. Are you kidding me? Not every dude's Arnold Schwarzenegger. You know, like, and before that, it was like, oh, every man's suave like Cary Grant. And, you know, it's like we've always had these things. And so for me, if you go back, what has masculinity always been? What have we always respected about men in all
That's
cultures across all time?
beautiful.
And there are common threads. And so for me, it's like one of the posts I just wrote is in the modern time, we've gotten into this really bad habit of saying, you know, what is a man? And when we say what's manly, our first instinct is to think, well, what's not womanly? It's like, hold on a second. The opposite of man, like when you see a guy, you watch a show like Yellowstone, right? And you see, you know, I don't know if you've watched Yellowstone, but one of the characters on there is you know, kind of becoming famous for being like the guy every woman wants. And it's like you watch him and you have this reaction like, oh, that's a man right there. Yeah. And we've all heard that, like, oh, that's a grown ass man. You know, when we say that phrase, are we thinking of a woman when we say that, or are we comparing him to other males? We're comparing him to other males. You know, the opposite of a man isn't a woman. The opposite of a man is a boy.
Yep.
And I think we've gotten too distracted by women's place and all that instead of saying boy makes excuses and doesn't take responsibility. You know, a boy avoids avoids making decisions. He's indecisive. He doesn't commit to anything.
Yep.
You know, a boy whines and complains when things aren't fair. You know, and so look at childish expressions of things, and then look at masculine
Yep.
expressions of things. And so, for me, I
It's
compare
the
a
guy who
man
didn't
to a
grow
boy.
up. Yeah.
Yeah, I compare a man to a boy. You know, if you're making excuses and blaming other people, that's not manly. What's manly is saying, you know what, yeah, bad stuff happens, but I'm going to step up and take ownership and
Yep.
overcome it anyway. You know, a man whines and complains instead of doing something about it. You know, and so yeah, I mean, let me pull that up because
Yeah, I saw that. That was an awesome list. It's worth sharing. And you're right.
yeah, you know,
There's a
so
great distinction there. It's like, and you're comparing, um, if there is a comparison that's it's helpful or valuable or healthy, it's like, yeah, what's immature? What's the avoidance? Where haven't you grown up? Where haven't you taken on ownership or responsibility? Where are you underdeveloped?
yeah,
I love this idea of like, it's not that you're broken or that something's inherently wrong. It's just often it's like, hey, you're just in this aspect, you're still underdeveloped.
yeah,
It's not very
yeah,
manly.
absolutely,
It's kind of boyish.
yeah, yeah. And so like this list that I made is, you know, a boy is selfish, whereas a man serves a cause bigger than himself.
Yeah.
I feel like that's pretty universal. You know, a boy wants to fit in and be cool. You know, you look at teenage boys in junior high and high school,
Yeah.
they just want to fit in and be cool. And every boy was like that for the most part in high school, right? Like it's very natural to want to fit in and be cool when you're 15. You know, whereas a man stands up for what he believes in, whether it's cool or not.
Yes.
A boy is indecisive and unsure of himself. A man makes a decision and commits. A boy whines when life isn't fair. A man doesn't feel sorry for himself. A boy is a slave to his appetites. A man has self control over his urges. A boy is irresponsible and untrustworthy. And a man takes responsibility for everything. No, that to me is something that you don't have to be an alpha or a beta, or you don't have to be extroverted or introverted. You don't have to be, you know, a bodybuilder or, you know, a triathlete or whatever. Any any male can make the decision to embody those things,
That's so powerful, brother. You
right?
don't have to
Um,
be an alpha male or any particular kind of male to do manly things and to
yeah.
have those attributes, those virtues, those characteristics that make a man.
And to be honest, most of those things apply to women too.
Yep.
Mature woman versus a mature man, right?
True.
That to me is I think we're one of the real like root issues with how we talk about these things is and I get it, right? Like feminism has affected a lot, and it's skewed a lot of the way we view things. And so men are trying to carve out and remember what being a man is, and the easiest way to do that is say, oh, well, what's manly and what's womanly.
Yep.
And so I'm not looking down on people that are making that. I'm trying to really just go deeper than that and say, when I really think, when I think of a man I admire and respect, it's, man, that's a man, that's a
Yeah.
grown man right there. I'm comparing him to the way boys behave.
Right.
I'm not even thinking about how a woman behaves. That didn't even cross my mind.
Right.
It's like, that's a mature adult man
I love that,
in
brother.
comparison to an immature or a teenage boy.
Yep.
And so if you're behaving in a way that reminds me of a teenage boy where something goes wrong and you start whining about it, I don't think, oh, you're behaving like a woman.
Yeah.
I think, oh, you're behaving like, you sound like my 15-year-old son,
Yeah.
whining and complaining, and you haven't matured enough to realize that that's just part of life. And the sooner you learn to do something about that, the better off everybody's going to be, including yourself.
Yeah.
Um,
Such a great distinction, man. I love that.
so
So actually, I wanted to ask. I'm curious about your writing process. You do. It seems like, correct me if I'm wrong. You seems like you do a lot more writing than you do like making videos or posts or audios or things like you're writing. What does that look like for you? What it seems like you're quite thoughtful about it. You're analytical. Like, have you been writing for a long time? Do you enjoy the writing process? You
no, I have not been writing for a long time now. In my career, I've been communicating my whole life. I'm a business owner, and I've done a lot of sales. I've had to coach my teams. I've had to, as far as developing that skill set, I learned it in my
in
career.
business?
But as far as my writing process, for me, um, the I feel like what we need in a lot of these dialogues is we need depth and we need nuance. We need real, fully thought out dialogues, not sound bites.
Yep.
And so when I started writing, a lot of people told me like, man, you need to make reels and you need to turn these into quick posts or whatever. And
15 seconds,
it's
man.
like, man, I can't say what I need to say in context to really get the point across in a 56-second reel. And
Yep.
so I'm going to do it the way I know it needs to be done. And if people respond to it, great. If not, well, but I'm not going to water down. I feel like it's important for me to say.
I love
Now,
that.
I don't post very often. Everybody says, "Oh, you got to post a day, you get the most engagement." And it's like, I can't do that.
Yep.
I spend, a week reflecting on an idea, um, and it'll be something that, that I haven't even fleshed out yet. It's like something I'll have a thought that I'm like, there's something there that I need to reflect on and bring some depth to, and I'll just spend time thinking about it. And then when I write, I actually PowerPoint because that's all I knew how to use. So all of my Instagram stuff, I make it in PowerPoint. So my creative process is, I'll just make the slides and I'll just write out everything I need to write. And that usually comes pretty quickly, kind of like this, where I'm just talking. But I'll usually end up with like 22 slides. And so the process of refining all that down is by far the most time consuming part, is taking, the brainstorm part of it
Yep.
where I really fully have the whole conversation and refining that down and refining it down and
I
refining it
love
down
it.
into 9 slides basically, is by far the most time consuming part. But I would say I probably spend 4 to 5 hours on each post.
That's awesome. And what's happening, that's really insightful. Thanks for sharing that process because writing is the golden key to thinking.
Absolutely.
And there's a lot of mind work. And I love the way you just described your process is it's the thinking process, right? It's where we learn how to think and articulate. And it's tough.
Yeah.
It's really hard because
It's
there's so much going on. It's everywhere and you could just dump it all. But to
yeah.
go through that work and mind work, okay, what does this actually mean? And how do I get it down to a concise, meaningful element here that I can use? Wow, it's a powerful process.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's very challenging. It's not easy. It's very, very demanding. And after I write a post, and then I'm very engaged with the comments too. Like I really engage and there's a lot of good dialogues even in the comment section. But after about 2 days after I post, I have to just, kind of disengage from Instagram, because if not, it just depletes me too much.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I'm really proud of the people that follow me. And a lot of people say, oh, people are too dumb to have a good attention span, and they're not willing to invest in reading a long post or whatever. And so, man, you look at the engagement and the number of comments that I'm getting, and the number, just how fast my page has grown. It's like, no, people are hungry for depth.
Yes,
People are
they
hungry
are.
for knowledge. And so I'm really proud of, you know, my audience and my followers, and how many people have followed me and engaged with my stuff. For it's easy to sit and think people are, lose hope in people, if you
Yep.
observe everybody's behavior. But man, I've been really encouraged, to receive what I've received,
Right.
from the people that have,
Because there are plenty of people out there who want a long dialogue. They want depth. They want to sit and
good. And
consume
yeah,
something, learn.
if it's good, and if you really take the time to put the quality and the effort in, and I think I think that is reflected in, in my work. I mean, I think it's very obvious that I've spent a lot of time really thinking through this stuff and really trying to come at it from every angle, not just
Yep.
like, oh, here's what I think everybody should be doing. I try to write in the first person, because um, and talk about my own mistakes and how I've learned these
Yep.
things, the right way. Because I think too often, think about it like being a father, right? Like, nobody responds really. We've all, most of us had that dad that ordered us around and just said, do this, do this, do this, do this. Like, how'd that work when you were the kid, right? Whereas there's the dad that sits you down and says, here's why I
Yeah.
don't want you to do this. Here's what I did wrong.
Yep.
And I want you to learn from me. And I think so much of the content that's written on Instagram, just across the board, on Twitter, on everything, is we're being that dad that's just ordering everybody around,
Yep.
instead of saying, man, I learned this the hard way. I'm telling you this because here's when I didn't do it and what it cost me. And I feel like having that kind of tone in a lot of the stuff that I write has really changed how it's received.
Man, you're so right. And
Uh,
I've been guilty of the other side, where I go through the experience, have it like, oh, just earn this thing. And then my thing, I get so excited. Oh, you guys, hey, everybody, you gotta stop doing that. Like, that's
oh
not
yeah,
working. Do this. It's awesome. But
yeah,
you're exactly right. You're just nailing it. Where if I step back and say, hey, this is, again, it's like we all know the dad lecturing doesn't work, right?
yeah.
The dad lecture just does not work. It just falls flat.
If you humanize it and you sit
Yep.
down and say, man, let me tell you a story about when I was 16
Yep.
and I did something similar and what happened to me, right? And and you really just talk, and you're authentic and you're human. That's always going to be more effective
Yep.
than, and I don't think people do it on purpose. I just think it's easy to fall into that trap of, like, even with very good intentions,
Yep.
coming across as condescending and talking down to people that might not know what you know, right?
Yep.
Like, if you're not careful, it's really easy to do
It's,
that. And
yeah, you step right over there. Yep.
that's why I do so much proofreading. That's why it takes me so long to edit those things down. It's not just what I'm saying, but am I saying this in a
Wow.
way
So
that's
good.
relatable? That isn't going to make people feel dismissed or condescended to or talked down to, but from a place of, like, listen, I'm when I was in your position, I made these same mistakes too, man. I'm not telling you you're an idiot for doing this stuff. What I am telling you is that if you stay on the track that you're on, I did that, man, and here's what happened.
Yep.
And I think I've been able to touch on some topics that, if I would have handled them the wrong way, it would have been really,
It would have gone the wrong
inflammatory.
way.
Yeah, inflammatory. Nobody would have learned. But
Right.
it's been cool. I've gotten a lot of comments so far on a lot of different posts of, like, man, at the beginning I was prepared to disagree with you, but by the end, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
You know,
Because you walk through it.
and you don't see many people saying that on social
Right.
media.
Yep. Exactly.
And I
Because
really think
because
that
of
just
that,
comes
there's
from,
so much vitriol, so much disagreement, so much these battles where it seems as though they're not even considering other views. It's just like, this is mine, this is yours, and we're gonna slash each other. And
Well, but we're trying to win.
right,
It's like, man, I'm not trying to be right. I'm trying to get it right.
yep,
You know,
or worrying about who's right versus what's right.
yes, that's great too.
So powerful, man. I love that, brother. Hey, I want to shift gears to two things you and I just kind of touched on before we hit the recording. Just the slow, steady work of some awesome results that you created, like one element at a time. And one was business, and the other one was transforming your body, putting on some serious muscle mass.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
in both of those instances, you talked about it was a long process, kind of one step at a time. Man, walk us through that a little bit, both of those, because I think they're similar principles, if not the same principle, where maybe you had the imagination, the curiosity, the vision of something you wanted to create, and then you just kept at it until you got the results you wanted.
Yeah. I think the best way to talk about that, I would use the metaphor of I was a baseball player. I played baseball in college and I was a pitcher, right? And so part of being a pitcher is, you have to just make the next pitch. I can't control the umpire. I can't control if my fielders make an error. I can't control if the batter gets a good hit. But I think it's easy in life to judge your success or failure on every pitch. And I see a lot of people judging success and failure after every single action. And I think what's been really helpful for me growing up as a baseball player is, like, if you look at somebody like in the major leagues, for instance, like, we don't judge them by every pitch. That's crazy. We don't even judge them by every game, because everybody has we definitely don't judge them by every inning. We don't even really judge them after a whole game of 130 pitches, right? We judge them over the course of a season. And even more so, we judge them over the course of a career.
Yep.
And life is the same way. And I think if you can shift your mindset from trying to win every pitch, I mean, nobody wins every pitch. Nobody throws every pitch perfectly. And there's always going to be a lot of elements that you have no control over. And a lot of people get distracted by that. It's like, oh, the metaphorical umpire made a bad call, and I lose my mind for 20 pitches in the game. Like, no, you have to immediately forget about what the umpire just did and go back to focusing on what you can control and executing the next pitch. And if you can, it's hard to do, but if you can keep that disciplined mindset of, like, I'm just going to execute each pitch the best I can. If I mess up, I'm going to learn from it, and I'm not going to do that again. By the time the game's over, you'll usually win. But not if you let a bad call throw you off your game for 15 pitches.
Yep.
Not if you let one of your fielders making an error throw your game off. And so I kind of learned from that. It's it's really easy to succeed if you just take, like, a death by 1,000 cuts approach. Just show up every day, execute every action to the best of your ability, and don't really focus on the results, at least not in the short term. Find the right actions and just trust that by the time the game's over, if you just execute that action over and over and over again, it will work out often enough that you'll win the game.
Yep. Man, that's true in investing and in business and in everything.
I feel like so many people think if they don't throw a no-hitter, it's a failure. It's like, dude, you're going to give up hits. You're going to walk people. Like, stuff's going to happen in real life. And maybe every once in a while, once a year, a pitcher will throw a perfect game. Right. And I think if people took a lot of the immediate pressure off and expanded their time frame for how they're evaluating either their personal growth or their fitness or their business or whatever it is, their marriage, anything, expand your time frame and execute the right actions over and over again. And it will work out often enough that people will eventually it will be something that people are like, wow, your marriage is amazing, or your business is awesome, or you're in great shape. And it's like, yeah, my marriage is amazing because we've spent about 2,000 hours arguing. You know, like there's only one way to get there, and that's showing up and doing the unsexy grunt work over and over and over again until you don't have to do it.
Yes. Oh, so good.
And that's not sexy,
No,
but it's
not at all.
also
It's just the
almost
grind.
it's almost, but it's like Zig Ziglar. You mentioned Zig Ziglar earlier. One of my favorite quotes is, he said, "There's no elevator to success. You have
Yep.
to take the stairs."
Yep.
And if you get really good, a lot of people try to swing for the fences and hit home runs because that's what we see highlights of. That's what
Sure.
looks sexy, right? But if you just go up and get a single every single time, if you just literally just one step at a time, it's almost impossible to fail.
Right.
It really is. It's just it's a matter of if or when. That's where talent comes in. It's how long does it talent will help me climb 3 steps at once. And so it's just how soon do you succeed? But regardless of your talent level, if you just execute the right action repeatedly, success is a foregone conclusion if you
Yep.
just have the patience to stick with it.
Just keep going. That's worth reemphasizing right there. It's almost impossible to fail if you just keep going. You persist in the right actions.
Yeah. I mean, and it's almost cliche for all the people that have become successful. We all say it. You say it, I say it, I see it 100 times a day on Instagram, but people still keep like, how do I go get the home run? That's why you're going to fail, dude, because you want the sexy part. You want to be able to hit the ball over the fence and have everybody cheer for you. And it's pride driven and ego driven. Instead of, we're all telling you there is no overnight success. We all just had to grind it out. Everybody that's on the other side that is successful says the same thing, but every 20-year-old guy messages me and is like, man, I'm so frustrated that I'm not rich yet. I'm like,
Shortcut it.
bro, you're a toddler, man. Are you kidding me right now? You're 20. Oh, I feel like I've already screwed my whole life up.
You just
Dude,
get started.
you have no idea. Like,
Yeah.
spend 10 years grinding it out and then tell me that you're not successful.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want, and then they never message me back because I didn't
Right.
tell them what they wanted to hear.
Oh, it's
I
because
want to
10
be
years,
rich tomorrow.
10 years of work. Yeah. And they keep hearing these rare stories of the kind of the something for nothing quick success. But you're right. The recipe is it's years of doing the right action.
And yeah, it's like, yeah, you can go dig a bunch of holes in the ground. You might strike oil, and the one guy that strikes oil is going to get a lot of publicity.
Yeah.
And so everybody's going to be out digging holes. It's like, or you can just do the basics and the fundamentals. Like the fundamentals, the fundamentals are fundamental for a reason. They
Right.
always work.
And
They're undefeated.
you were telling me before we got on, it's the same with your business. You just built it one sale at a time, one client at a time. It wasn't this big mass of one day. Then,
Oh yeah,
a whole bunch of people showed up. You just one client at a time, and then the compounding effect.
compound effort.
Yeah.
It's
And then
compound
eventually,
effort.
like it hits, and you're like, wow, okay, now our business is vastly different than what it was, last year or 3 years ago.
And I knew that going in. I think that was I actually listened to all the people that said success doesn't come overnight. You got to just execute the right activities, show up every day and carry the water, do the work and just keep doing it. Well, I actually listened and I just did that.
That's awesome.
People reach out to me and they want to know what the secret to success is. And it's just like, do the boring stuff over and over and over again. Like, I don't like that answer.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Can you give me a better answer, please? Something a little
Right.
more exciting, a little easier, a little faster.
Yeah, if you want to try that, that's fine. You can swing for the fences every time, and you might hit a home run. More than likely, you're just gonna strike out.
Yeah. And the guy who's hitting the base hits every single time is going to succeed.
Is undefeated.
Okay, how'd you do this in fitness? Because you went from, well, give us your number. Like the pictures I saw, like you were pretty skinny, bro, and then you bulked up.
Well, the pictures where I was really skinny, I was really unhealthy. I was working like 100 hours a week, and like I was so focused, like I wasn't even really eating. I was just like,
Wow.
I didn't have time to go eat. I just had chocolate milk in the refrigerator. It's like, oh, this feeling of hunger is a distraction. And so I'm just
Dude.
going to chug chocolate milk because I don't have time for that shit. I got work to do.
Yep.
And so I happen to be like an ectomorph, so I lose weight if I'm not careful. A lot of people have the opposite problem. For me, it's like if I don't eat 4,000 calories a day, I lose weight.
Right.
Metabolism is crazy. So that picture, I was really underweight. I was probably 30 pounds underweight in that before picture. So getting back to I was like 165, and I'm 6'4". So I was like 165. So I mean, I looked like
That's
I was,
skinny.
yeah. And I mean, I looked like something was like wrong. And so it was pretty easy to get up to like 200, just slowing down and just eating 3 times a day.
Yep.
Got me up to like 200. And then, the rest of it was just, I was in shape in college. I was in pretty good shape already. I was about 210, 215. And so it really wasn't, it didn't take what it takes a lot of people to put on muscle for me just because of my body type. Um, but it took about 2.5 years of just, I was at the gym every, 5 nights a week for 2 hours, but I had, I think it's important to point out, like this was after my business was successful. I think a lot of men are grinding it out, and then they're like, oh, I'm not also in great shape. It's like, man, you can't be great at everything at the same time. Like I had the capacity to spend 2 hours, like right now, I go to the gym at 2 in the afternoon. I'm there from 2 to 4 while everybody else is having work,
Nice. Nice.
um,
Let me ask
so
you a question about that, because that's an interesting insight. If you could go back and do it over again, could you prioritize your health in a different way so you didn't get unhealthy? Because I know, especially when you're in it and you're learning it. And again, we don't get the chance to go back and do it over again, but
I personally wouldn't have done it any differently. I
you
feel
would
like I
just
could have done
grind it and just push hard.
just, get it over with. I think the important context I would add is that in your career, are you doing that in a field or in a vertical that kind of grind has the potential to have an end date to where you don't have to grind that much anymore. I don't think anybody should grind the way
So
that I grind
getting just
for a
obsessed
20-year.
for a fixed short period of time.
Yeah, but for me, it was like, all right, the next 7 years, my kids were babies. And I sat down and told my wife, I said, I don't have much to offer a baby. The next 7 years are mommy time. If I want us to establish a life, I've got 7 years to make that happen so that by the time they're old enough to need me, I have the capacity to be there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to pile in 20 years worth of work into 7 years so that I can check that box off and be done with it. And then we'll be in a position financially that I can be present at home. I can be there for my boys. I can do all these things. And so it was a strategy that I decided on before I ever started. This is something that I've got a timeline. I've got a deadline that I've got to hit this certain number financially by this deadline. And anything that I have to call anything within reason, I'm not saying go get on cocaine or what, but like anything within reason that has to be put on the back burner for now. I'll get to that when I'm done with this.
So setting a target,
yeah,
setting a deadline, and then paying a price to get a result. Do you feel like you missed out on life during those 7 years?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I have, I have almost no memories of my boys, especially my younger son. I have about a 6-year window where I have no memories of him at all. I just have pictures. And that's hard.
That's super hard.
It is, but at the same time, I'm proud of what I did. I'm proud of the sacrifices that I made because now I'm able to really, really be there for him now that he's old enough. And we've got a really close relationship now.
Beautiful.
We talk really deeply. We go do Muay Thai together twice a week.
Nice.
And,
yes.
We'll drive to and from Muay Thai together, and we'll practice it together. And then on the way back, we have all these chances to talk and do all these things. And so Yeah, I don't have many memories of him when he was 6, but I'm gonna have a lot of really good quality memories that will more than balance that scale back out.
And how are you able to flip the switch? I know some men get going and they get in that drive and they never let up, and they kind of get to a point where it's insatiable. It's never enough. And so they'll just keep
Um,
going like that indefinitely. It seems like
well,
you hit a target and you're like, hey, I can switch that.
for me, the goal wasn't the doing, it was the target. It's like I'm aiming at, I'm just hypothetically, I'm aiming at 500 grand a year.
Right.
And once, and I did, it's easy because, the business that I'm in isn't something that I'm really passionate about. It's pretty dry. It's not exciting. It's not anything that I'm excited to wake up and go do. It was a means to an end.
Right.
It was the vehicle that I had to build the life that I needed to build.
Yep.
So I
Yep.
just made the most of it. And so for me, at the very beginning, it was like, I don't really care what the vehicle is to get me there. I just know where I'm trying to go. So once I hit 500,000 a year, I'm out.
And I'm out because it's my target. I hit my
But I
target.
knew that,
Now I'm living more in on purpose. Right.
yes,
That was a vehicle,
like,
and you were
let's
clear
get
about that.
this phase over with. Let's build the foundation for my life. Let's get this launched into orbit. Because a spaceship uses 90% of its fuel just getting into orbit. And as a
Yep.
man, that's the most challenging phase of life. It's like
Yep.
you've got
Just
to go
launching.
from zero, unless you inherited money or you're just insanely talented or whatever. When you get married and you have a family and you got kids, you have to go from zero, like no momentum, no nothing. Oftentimes you got to dig yourself out of holes you've created for yourself. And you have got to launch not just you, but your family's life from ground level into orbit. And that takes an insane amount of fuel to do that. But once you get into orbit, just like getting in shape, it's really hard to get in shape, but it's not that
So
hard to
much
stay in
easier to
shape,
stay in shape. Yep. Yeah. You get
right?
in your
And so,
systems and habits and patterns. And I would say that's true also for everything in life. Once you get things dialed in and optimized, that's the word I like to use, optimized. Once you get things optimized, it's a lot easier to keep them there.
yeah.
But you got to get
And I
in
would
that
say one of
space.
the ways that I've done to shift the gears is I've found other things to pour that tenacity into that
Yeah.
aren't work. My tenacity is like, yeah, after I was done with that work, there was a lot of work I had to do to get my marriage where it needed to be because my marriage wasn't, I didn't completely ignore it, but I'd caused enough pain
Yep.
that I had a lot that I had to reconcile with and a lot to, ask forgiveness
Restore.
for and a
Yep.
lot that I had to restore,
Yep.
and I had to, and so I feel like it was easy to shift gears um, by just finding new things to pour myself into as
Right.
opposed to, just chasing more and more and more and more money, more and more and more and more business. Like you can go back to, you know, whether you're a whether you're a Christian, you can go look in the read what Solomon wrote in Ecclesiastes about how it's all vanity, or you can go read philosophy from, the Stoics and the Greeks, and I mean in every ancient literature, all anything you would call wisdom has been warning men against that
Yep.
as long as men have been alive. You can't there is no fulfillment in that constant chasing of material possessions
Yep.
and wealth, fame and power. It's a black hole. Like everybody and every man in history that knew anything has been screaming, "Hey,
It
that's
doesn't
not the
work.
path, bro. That's not gonna work."
Exactly.
And so I knew
It's
going
been
in, I was
tried,
like,
gentlemen. It has
it's
been
been tried,
tried.
and it's like I'm still saying the same thing, and dudes try to argue and be like, "Bro, you don't have to listen to me. Like, just read anything. Read anything from men
Yeah.
that have tried to like put themselves in a position to be an advisor, whether it's a spiritual person or a non-spiritual person, or whether it's Gandhi or Buddha or Jesus. Like, nobody's telling you. I've never read anything that has told men, "Hey, bro, the key to satisfaction is constant wealth
Yeah.
acquisition and power.
Just
You'll
keep
you'll you'll,
chasing
you'll die
money.
happy."
Yeah,
Like nobody
exactly.
has ever said that to me. Nobody.
Yep.
At what point are you going to hear it? And so
Yeah.
for me, like, I feel like I was impressionable enough at a young age to believe that. Like I heard that stuff, I read that stuff. It's like, okay, I'm just going to believe that those older dudes know what they're talking about, and I'm not going
Huge.
to, And so, yeah, I mean, I knew when it was time to stop before I ever started,
That's
and I feel like that really
so
helps.
pivotal. It's so important, man. I love that. So good. Ryan, this has been awesome, man. I gotta run to a speaking engagement. This has been so fantastic. Really appreciate your posts, the things the price you're paying to think and write and share and things
Yeah,
that are
I
working for you,
appreciate
right?
it.
That's huge. That's so valuable to turn around and give back some of the things you're learning and to take some time, make some time today to come on, man. I really appreciate that.
Oh
Where
man,
can people connect with you, brother?
right now it's just Instagram at the Wisdom of Kings.
Okay. The Wisdom of Kings on Instagram. It's a great platform there. Lot of great content, a lot of great stuff. Ryan, appreciate you, brother.
Great.
Thanks for
Appreciate you.
being on here, man.